Kanievsky, apparently, as the Levavka might have said, was that by his father, the Stripler Rebbe, said that the mistake is that it's not the 3 weeks, it's Sphira. So B'diavad, if something happens and you happen to make Shekiyanu or your suit tears, you can go buy a new suit, or exactly. I was thinking to myself, if something happens favorably, I'm going to be sad about it. Let's say somebody got a job offer, or somebody got a good grade, or somebody got good news from a family member, something like that. It's not like we have to be like the 3 weeks, I think, is what Rabbi Shapiro was trying to say.
And here, the other point is that just waking up and saying Modeh in the morning is the beginning of a whole day of gratitude, And in order to be grateful, one has to think good. Think good and it will be good, because we know that, look at the power of thought, that if a man sees a woman dressed freshly in the street and he starts thinking things about her, according to Halacha, he sinned already. So how is the power of thoughts thinking about that? You know what I'm saying? That if we look at that, we could see the power of thinking. And then from thoughts comes the words. And those are even more, that I say verbalization causes manifestation. That's what brings it into the physical world, words. Anyway, I'll let you go. My husband's ready to teach, and you guys are going to learn.
You want to turn on the other one also?
Oh, yeah. I did already.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Say, welcome, YouTubers, and tonight's class is about what? Tell them.
And portion of the Torah reading for this week and the Haftorah that accompanies it on this coming Shabbos. And we're going to be learning Parshas Emor. This is chapter 21 of Leviticus. If you have a Chumash, please grab it and have it handy so that we can look at some of the texts together and get more out of the class. So this is, once again, it's Perek Chaf, chapter 21 in Leviticus in Chumash Vayikra. First thing I'd like to do is to ask this question: how do we look upon the Kohanim today? There are certain Jewish people who are descendants of Aaron, and they are called Kohanim. They are the only legitimate priests of the Jewish people. You can be a rabbi from any of the tribes. That doesn't matter. A Torah teacher can be from any of the tribes. It can be someone who converted to Judaism, and someone who was not observant and took on themselves to fulfill and complete the Torah. All of those people, of course, who are involved in teaching us and in guiding us, they deserve special respect. A Kohen is a descendant of Aaron the high priest, and automatically upon birth, they have a special sanctity, a special holiness that we must recognize. We take them pretty much for granted now because they're not functioning and officiating in the Holy Temple at this time. But the Torah does not allow them to descend from their holiness. They still have to keep very special laws that are outlined, especially in this portion, and that helps us to appreciate their holiness and the mitzvahs that we're supposed to do to show that we respect them. And this is very, very important to bear in mind. So once again, we have discussed the concept of holiness means that God shows himself more in a particular situation, a certain place, with regard to certain holy articles, and with regard to certain holy people. So that should direct our study this evening, especially to show the special respect for the Kohanim, which is outlined in this portion. Also, there is a review of all the holidays that we observe all year. And we use this portion, Emor, for all the holidays at one point or another to bring out the various commandments of the different holidays. So that's in this portion as well. Also, the instruction to make a leap year, this year is a leap year, is also discussed in this portion. So we're going to cover what we can. It's a giant portion with a giant scope, and we'll take what we can from it. So we'll begin with the first sentence, as we often do, which gives the name of the portion. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. And God said to Moshe, Emor lekohanim, say to the priests, Bnei Aaron, the sons of Aaron, v'yamarto lehem, and say to them, Lenefesh lo yitama v'yamav, that under normal circumstances, with exceptions, they are not to defile themselves, not to attend a funeral, or put themselves in contact with, unfortunately, someone who has passed away. This causes the worst form of uncleanliness called tumas mace, or uncleanliness due to the passing away of a dear soul. So the Kohanim are holy, their bodies are holy, and for the most part, they have to avoid defiling themselves in any way. Right now, we're all unclean because we don't have the holy temple, we don't have the red heifer, we don't have the special waters which would clear us and clean us from that uncleanliness. But the Kohanim still, even to this day, have to maintain a level of purity as much as possible, even under these circumstances. So we see that the verse starts with a double expression. Emor lekohanim, say to the priests, and the Aaron, v'yamarto lehem, and you should say to them. Very repetitive. We know the Torah is so precise and so brief that one letter, even a dot, can teach us major important laws. Here we have this expression, Emor v'yamarta, say and you shall say. What's the reason for that? Rashi gives a beautiful explanation that helps us really understand our responsibilities as Jewish people in general. That the Emor lekohanim means speak to the priests, and that applies to today as well. We have to teach the Kohanim, when you meet someone who is a Kohen, we have to educate them and teach them that God gives them a special function, a special holiness, which we'll describe. They are the only ones who can officiate in the Holy Temple. And even though we don't have the Holy Temple now, they still have that holiness as we wait daily for the coming of Mashiach, when they will resume their very holy duties. So not only the adult Kohanim have to be told, but the children of the Kohanim, even though they're not bar mitzvah yet, they also have to be trained not to go to a situation in which they can become unclean. So let's take a minute to understand, what does it mean to be unclean altogether? It's such a strange expression. And what's wrong with the cemetery? Yes, it's a very sad place to be, or going to a funeral parlor. What's the problem there? The Jewish soul is a part of God. It is as holy as you can get. And that's why we have to behave very carefully, because God told us that a part of us is part of Him, and that He wants us to keep His holy Torah and live a very proper way. It's a responsibility that we all have, whether we're a Kohen or not. Unfortunately, when a person passes away, there's a nosedive by spiritual forces of uncleanliness. Now, what's that stuff called tumor? What is it altogether? Well, I'm going to ask you, can you see germs?
Mhm.
Can you see bacteria? I don't think so, right? Can you see viruses? Like God should continue to save us from that coronavirus and all those related viruses. We can't see those things. I don't even know they exist. Maybe y'all made it up. It's a big story, a fun story, etc., and just to make money for the doctors, etc. We know that would be ridiculous. There are forces of evil. Think of it as harmful angels in a sense, forces that feed off of holiness. We have learned this on our Sunday Chassidus class. We have learned how when a person behaves, it depends on what they're doing, whether you're feeding those forces of uncleanness or not. And when, unfortunately, a Jewish soul has passed away from the Jewish body, that these forces of uncleanness make a nosedive to get at that body and cause it to not only become unclean, but to generate uncleanness as well. So we're going to give you a real yicky example. This is in one of the commentaries that speaks about this, that you've probably seen it from time to time. There are animals that leave excrement, usually dogs, they leave excrement outside. People have walked their dog, etc. And what do you notice? You notice that, especially on a warm summer day, of course it doesn't smell better because of it, on a warm summer day, you see that thing is covered with flies and insects of all kinds, looking to be nourished from that excrement. The whole sight is very disgusting, and I hope I didn't spoil your supper. I didn't mean to do that. But this is used as an example to show you how these forces of uncleanliness, and they're very real and very powerful, they make a nosedive to get nourishment from that holy body. That body was holy. It was housing a holy soul. And now that the soul is gone, here's our chance. Go grab it. Go get whatever holiness and energy you can get out of it. So that's actually the mechanics behind what causes uncleanliness to occur. I say it's a very real thing, even though we can't see it and we cannot feel it normally. We can't get rid of it right now, but we can't do the best we can. We wash our hands, we go to the mikveh. What uncleanliness we're able to remove, because the woman, she goes to the mikveh periodically when she has her time, etc. We can remove whatever is still possible for us to remove, and that's what we do. That's what we work hard to make sure that we do that. So here, with regard to the Kohanim, even though they're not officiating in the holy temple, they still are holy, and they must guard themselves, not attend funerals unless, God forbid, it's for a close relative, as we will know. We'll learn soon, and we'll learn the reason for that too, why there are exceptions. Another exception is if there's someone, God forbid, who passed away and there's no one to bury them, that the Kohen has to defile himself and bury that person. This shows us another important thing of how desperately important it is to see to it that one who is departed, that they're buried as promptly as possibly and as respectfully as possible. This is so important to the Almighty. If there was a Kohen and there's no one around, he yells, "Is there anybody who can help me?" Nobody can help him. He has to take a shovel and bury that person. That's how powerful that law is. That's called the mace mitzvah. As a synagogue rabbi over the years, I had to do many funerals. Well, there was one situation in which the cemetery people were otherwise occupied. I don't know what happened. The grave had been dug, but they weren't available to help fill it in. And as you know, many of us, especially when we can, we try to participate in that huge mitzvah of the burial of the dead. It's one of the enormous kindnesses that the Almighty gave us to do. This is a person that's in such a situation, their life has passed, and their body is out to be disgraced. God forbid, that it's such a tremendous duty and such a responsibility that even a Kohen who's always supposed to avoid the cemetery, except if it's for a close relative, as we will learn, that they have to do it. So that's an interesting law. I want to just touch upon this concept that the adult Kohanim have to train the kids. They have to train the kids to also avoid uncleanliness. And they're not even bar mitzvah yet, even youngsters, really youngsters. They have to be trained right away. This again shows that even though their body isn't bar mitzvah yet, they're just a kid, right? They're just a kid. They already have that special holiness too. And therefore they have to be taught to avoid any kind of exposure to that uncleanliness. Remember, the uncleanliness is real. It's a powerful
He's
thing.
calling you.
Yeah. Number five?
Mhm.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just curious, does this, for children, for example, the Kohanim teaching their sons, does this include household animals, pets, things like that maybe would expire and would pass away?
No, that's a wonderful question. That's a wonderful question. Right. Animals are unclean, but they don't cause that uncleanliness to fill up the room, by the way. They do not. It's not that severe. Etc. So you asked a very important point, though. It so happens that a Kohen has to avoid all kinds of uncleanliness in order to be able to officiate. But this is the worst one. This is the worst one of all. That was a wonderful question. Also, the girl Kohanim, it's called a Kohenes, they're not commanded for this because they don't officiate. The women don't officiate in the Holy Temple. So they don't have to maintain that special sanctity too. That was a very, very good question. Excellent.
So are there other things for a boss Kohen that she has? I mean, as far as her her
behavior.
For Shida, Nidos Tovos, yeah, for sure. For any Bas Yisrael, but
a Bas Yisrael is supposed to a Bas Kohen, I'm trying to say, If
Fast Cohen,
possible,
yeah.
she should marry a Torah scholar because of her station. She has that
Huh.
higher station as well, even though she
Yeah.
doesn't have that special responsibility about the cemetery that we mentioned or going to a funeral parlor. They are under extra, I would call it, under extra attention because the way they live and the way they function affects their father or their brothers who are officiating Kohanim or who will eventually be officiating Kohanim. That's a very, very wonderful question, too. I wanted to say that we can expand this right now to our daily life with regard to training children. That the adult Kohen mustn't let his child or another Kohen child become unclean. This applies to what kids hear, what they see, which creates enormous uncleanliness, unfortunately, in the mind with the way people talk, language that should always be pure and clear talk, proper talk, and shown the proper example by their parents. This is exemplified right over here, that here the little boy is not even officiating. He's not officiating at this time. We don't have the Holy Temple. And still, the father has to say, you must know that you mustn't, attend a funeral or go in the cemetery unless, God forbid, it's for a close relative. And we'll be speaking about that too. So this
Robert
is
Schaefer?
yeah. Go right
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
somebody
please
so
do
much,
that.
but,
I'm glad because that's I appreciate your coming. And participating.
So during the Yom Tov, and I've seen Kohanim bring their young sons to the front of the room for Birkat Kohanim. They're either under the palace with their father, or they maybe have their own palace. But basically, they're officiating in a way, but they're not bar mitzvah age yet, right? Am I right, or am I?
You're right, and that's training, right? What you're receiving is actually training. They're being trained so that when they are bar mitzvah, they'll be able to do that. But I'm so glad that you mentioned the priestly blessing. You realize, and we should all realize, that is one of the services of the Holy Temple. That's one service that can still be fulfilled today. And as we know, the Levites, if there are Levites in the show or firstborn, that they wash the hands of the Kohanim before they go up and bless the people. It's actually one of their official services that they can still do as we wait for the Holy Temple to be rebuilt. Now, in Israel, if you've ever visited Israel, the priestly blessing is recited daily, not just on the holidays, and not just on Shabbos, but daily. And I remember when I visited Israel, it made such a huge impression upon me, many things. And it was, just a regular weekday. And the Kohanim was saying, Hashem v'yishmerecha. And I was just so completely overawed. And I felt the holiness of the land of Israel. So why don't we do it every day too? You can't really be, if you're going to bless your fellow Jew, you have to be besimcha. You have to really be in a state of joy. And if you live outside Israel, you can't have that kind of state of joy, that level of joy, in order to bless the people properly. So when do we do the blessings? On the holidays, of course, which are all great holidays of great enjoyment. In fact, Sukkot is called Man Sukkosenu, the time of our joy. And all the holidays, including Pesach, which just passed, and Shavuos, which is coming, these are holidays in which we're in especially good spiritual mood, not only a intellectual mood, not just an emotional mood, but a special spiritual mood. So that's why we can have the priestly blessing. But every time they go up, we should say to ourselves, there they are. There they are. These are the very people who will be officiating in the third and final Holy Temple, and feel a great sense of joy that this one service only they can do. This one service. You and I can bless each other. That's gorgeous. That's fine. But when they bless, the Almighty, especially listening and especially carrying down that blessing to us. It's a miraculous thing that happens. In fact, it likes, I'm spending a little time on this, but I think because it's still in practice now, thank God, that when you and I pray on our own, and we do, and that's what we're supposed to do with our prayers, not just say the words, but to really have our audience, our talk with the Almighty, and express our needs to Him, etc., and establish that wonderful relationship. So the Almighty is very kind. Whatever you ask, when you ask sincerely, you get it. You do get it. but you're going to ask me, but I don't see it with my eyes. Where is it? So it has to really come down a spiritual elevator, like what you and I have learned in our Hasidus class. It has to come down, and at each stage, each floor. Remember, we learned about the apartment building that it starts on the top floor, and then there's a whole debate: is this person worthy? Okay, bring it down to the third floor. Then there's another debate. Okay, bring it down to the second floor. Okay, bring it down to the first floor. And then for it to be a physical paycheck, right, or a physical glass of milk for your kid, etc., it has to come all the way down. So the reason that we pray every day, everything's given to us. God sets all the blessings for us on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Why don't we see it right away? Because each day we pray, please bring it down. Please send it down the spiritual elevator. Well, now you'll really preach when the Kohanim bless us. Then it goes automatically without all these debates. It's sent express. We still have to pray it should materialize, but it's sent down express. That's what a wonderful thing that is. Okay, thank you very much. That's a very good point. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit further with this topic, and then we're going to take up some other things as well. In Morla Kohanim, this is his Kohanim. It's a beautiful piece, he says. In the past portion, you remember, was Kedoshim, God is telling us to be holy. So the Almighty told all the Jewish people to be holy, and the Kohanim have to be extra careful to be holy and to avoid any defilement. Why? Because they're God's personal servants, and they're like from the people of his house. Like you have people who stay with you, they're the people of your house. The Kohanim are the people, God's special tribe, special people that are in his house in the Holy Temple. And when the day that the Mishkan was set up, this is interesting, the day that the Mishkan was set up, on that day, this portion was given, that they were told. Because now they're going to have to really put into practice. Aaron's sons have to put into practice and be a holy people. Okay, I'm going to try to go to actually another topic. The honor that we bestow upon the Kohen. And this is something that we can practice right now as well. So I'm going to skip to that topic right now. By the way, just while I'm finding the page, we notice that Kohanim are restricted into whom they can marry. And that's because a person's wife has great influence over them, and therefore the Torah selects certain women that would not be suitable for a Kohen. That is in practice today too, of course. Okay. All right. Here's how to honor a Kohen. Now, you and I have been in this situation. You're at a banquet, okay? If you're at a banquet, you're sitting at your table, and there's somebody that you know that's a Kohen there. What you do is you tell the waitress to serve the Kohen first. That's still in practice. This honor and respect that goes to the Kohen is in practice today too. Okay, if you're going to wash your hands and there's a Kohen there, put the Kohen in front of you to let him wash his hands first. So I'm mentioning these things because they're terribly neglected. And these are ways in which we can fulfill what God wants us to do. The Kiddush Tov, you should make him handle. We as Jewish people, the Kiddush Tov, we have to show holiness and show us extra respect for the Kohen, that he's special. Kedusha means to be separated, by the way. You can be separated for good and separated for the opposite. So here, the Kiddush Tov, you sanctify the Kohen and you give him the respect to have him be served first, washed first. Okay, also, maybe you've seen this also, you have someone make the motzi. You've been at different affairs and banquets where they have someone make the motzi. It's a very big mitzvah to give that to the Kohen, to say the motzi. It seems like a small thing, but each one of these things adds up to a big total. It's a very holy thing. Okay, if you have a mezuzah, right? You have a mezuzah, you're going to bench as a group, then you probably, when it's given to someone else, they say B'shus HaKohen. It's a very big mitzvah to give the leading of the mezuzah to the Kohen. Each of these things is one of the ways in which we're fulfilling what it states in this portion, in which we the Kiddush Joe, we have to treat that Kohen with respect and holiness. And of course, as we know, when the Torah is read, that is a great requirement. Is there a Kohen in the shul? Be very careful about that, to call it the Kohen first. If there's no Levi, you may have noticed, the Kohen takes the first two aliyahs, not just the first one, the first two aliyahs. The Kohen is of the tribe of Levi, as we know, so the Kohen actually takes the Levi's place. If there's no Kohen and no Levi, it's permissible to call it the Yisrael first, if there's no Kohen or Levi there. Many shows, if there's a Levi, they will call the Levi first. They will do that, because the Levi also has a special sanctity, not like the Kohen, but he does have a special function and sanctity too. There was a story, I'm going to tell you the story, you'll enjoy the story. Only part of the story is here, so I'm going to tell the rest of it. There was a very great rabbi whose name was Rabbi Preda. And he had a student. This is a good lesson in education. When those who have handicaps, that it's difficult for them to learn. They may have different problems. They may be autistic. There's all kinds of different problems. By the way, autistic children can learn. They can learn. It takes enormous patience, but they can. And that's what this story is about. This Rabbi Preda had a student who could learn, but in order for him to learn, you had to repeat the lesson, and you're going to be amazed, 400 times. 400 times. But the thing is, and I've noticed this also, I've had students that I had to do a lot of repeating for too, a lot of repeating. This student, after 400 times, learned the lesson, could repeat it and understand. It was a very unusual case. So this Rabbi Preda was so patient. He's a rabbi of the Talmud. I'm not talking about a first grade teacher. This is a rabbi of the Talmud who would repeat the lesson 400 times for that student. And then the student would learn. Well, watch this. Now, this is a good lesson for teachers and for everybody else too, if you're instructing someone. One day, Rabbi Preda was actually called in the marketplace. I guess maybe there was a shiloh. His services were needed, etc. And his mind was on it. And he taught the student first, the 400 times, and the student didn't learn. It's a very, very important lesson. The student didn't learn this time. He did it the 400 times, which is an enormous job, right? An enormous thing. But still the student didn't learn. Why? Because the teacher's mind wasn't fully on what they were doing. Tells you the sincerity and the devotion we have to the Torah, and when we're teaching someone, we're instructing someone, especially our own children as well, too. So what did Rabbi Preda do? He did it another 400 times. He did it another 400 times, not to cheat this student of that lesson. So in his mind, he said, what should we do for him? How should we reward him? Should we give him 400 years or a special Om Papa? I get a little emotional when I tell this story. Should we give him 400 years to live, or should we give him a special Om Papa? So the Almighty stepped in. Says, give them both. Give them both. He should have a tremendous Omabot, and he should have a 400 years life. So he was asked, of course, he lived for such a long time. They asked him, what did you do that you, he doesn't even mention this. What did you do that you lived for such a long time? He says, nobody ever came into the base of Medrash to learn Torah earlier than I was the first one in. Like the first one in Shul, like we all know somebody, it's always the first person in Shul. And he says, I never said Hamotzi myself out loud for a group if there was a Kohen present. I always honored the Kohen with the task. That's why I lived for 400 years. And another thing he says also, if I ate from an animal, there were actually certain gifts we're supposed to give to the Kohen. It's not in practice now, but even for, not a sacrifice, even for a regular animal, there's certain parts you're supposed to give to the Kohen. He says, I always, before eating, I made sure that the Kohen got his portion. So what do we see from this very great person? That things that might seem to us not so greatly important were tremendously important to him. That's why the Almighty gave him 400 years. There's very few people. Yishai, like David's father, was so safe that he lived for 400 years too. It's really an amazing thing. So something you really to think about.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Schaefer.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome.
Rabbi Schaefer, I
Yeah.
wanted to mention that Dane
Please
and
do.
I did something also
Yeah,
that is regarding Kuvod Kohanim.
good.
We said during the two boys when they had their Aufshirnish, that we gave the first cut to the Kohen if it was one of the room.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, actually, one time there wasn't one, so there was a Levi. It turned out the Levi was, and the Levi's son said, "I'm a Levi," but then we saw that his father was there. He said, "No, your father maybe should go first." You know, so
That was a wonderful thing to do, and I've seen a lot of
yes,
places.
but
that
I
do
don't know if that's in your sefer exactly, but we thought that was the kind of like giving the benching to the Kohen for the
it says that whenever there's a mitzvah to be done, any type of thing to put the Kohen first. So you did the Kiddush Torah, you fulfilled it, right? Kadoshi Yelot, he should be holy unto you. Beautiful, very, very good, very, very nice. Okay, I want to go a little bit further. There's a very important mitzvah in this portion. It's called the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name. And this is something that we're all responsible to do. Kiddush Hashem, in its greatest situation, is where a Jew is threatened, with their life is threatened, and they are under severe circumstances where someone is trying to get them to sin. But before I go into that, I'll go into it just briefly with the time that we have. Each of us, wherever we go, whatever we say, wherever we are seen, especially in public, have to be so very careful. We go into a store, make sure that you pay and pay correctly and pay the proper amount very, very carefully, because we are seen by the world, including not only our own brethren, but by the non-Jew as well, as being special people. They know that we're special. And if you want to know how they know it, they sense it. People, the Rebbetzin and I, we have been in places where people came up and hugged us or asked for help. They told me, I talked to my pastor, they talked to their priest, whatever, etc., and it didn't do me any good. It didn't mean anything to me, etc., because they sense the falsehood. The Rebbetzin speaks about it all the time. They sense the falsehood. And they come up to us. There was one fellow, he started crying as he was talking. A non-Jew. He started crying because he felt right away they sense the holiness within the Jewish people. Of course, at times they're so jealous that you know what it results in, etc. But there are others who are very respectful and very appreciative, etc. I tell the story. I used to take my kids. Yeah.
I don't want to bring up a topic that's maybe sensitive, or I don't know, maybe you have other listeners on YouTube and everything you may or may not want to answer. But I was just wondering what your opinion of somebody like Yael Eckstein. Do you know who I'm talking about?
About who?
She's Yael Eckstein. She's the daughter of a fellow that did quite a lot to help Yidden in Russia, especially the people that survived the Carbon.
Yeah.
And she's taking over her father's job to provide food boxes.
Wow.
But she's joined up with a Goyish organization, Christians that want to help Jews. And I'm not saying it's controversial. I'm just saying sometimes it makes me think twice a little bit, because it's a strange combination. It's a strange marriage,
Yeah.
So
this is something that has to be treated very carefully. We do give tzedakah. We do. One is fulfilling the commandment to give charity by giving to a non-Jew. We should know that. And that we should try to teach them as much as we can to believe in one God and to keep the 7 notified commandments. The question is, when you make an official alliance with an organization.
I mean, she's a remarkable lady. She's the daughter of a man that did a huge number of great things for the Yidden. So, I mean, I'm not putting her down in any way. Don't mistake me, is what I'm saying. But I just think it's just odd that the commercials on TV are like after she finishes giving her spiel and showing her videos of being over in Russia, then this other guy comes on who's clearly, Gullick of some kind, So
Well,
I don't know.
okay, so I would answer you this way. The basic idea of helping non-Jews as well is part of the mitzvah, the commandment to give charity. And that one gets credit for giving tzedakah to a non-Jew as well. And it's a wonderful Kiddush Hashem that sanctifies God's name. But when you're talking about making alliance with other organizations, then of course they are free to do with the money and with their influence as independent people, and therefore one could run into great trouble that way. For instance, a Christian or a Catholic agency may do very wonderful things in terms of helping the needy, no matter what their faith is, no matter what their situation is. But one has to be very careful, because in many cases this is used to try to influence the Jewish person to start believing in JC and things of that nature.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was afraid they'd be kind of like missionary kind of thing.
Alliance, right? So,
yeah.
You have to be very careful with that. Okay, there's a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to bring it up.
I'm glad. That's exactly what the class is for, and that's how much I appreciate so much your participation. That you bring things up. That's wonderful questions, and we learn. So we all learn so much from that as well. Okay, so I was trying to bring out that the way we behave, courtesy, holding the door for someone, the tiniest little thing. When people see that a religious person, they know which women are religious because they see the way they dress. They can tell the way that they dress, and they can tell that that's a religious person too. So when they see us in the store, they see us in the street, they see us at a baseball game, no matter where it is, they watch very carefully to see how we talk, how we behave, if we act courteously and respectfully towards others, etc. Just greeting. I told you that story of the rabbi. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, who survived the Holocaust. I told you that story. That as you know, the Nazis made their name be erased forever. Showed unbelievable barbaric cruelty, and they had guns all the time. But they just felt. I'm not kidding. For no offense, for absolutely nothing, just felt like shooting someone. That was perfectly fine. That was perfectly good, etc.
Sounds like Baltimore City.
The Polish.
God forbid. Right.
God should watch over me. I'm very concerned too. My son was just telling me about an incident right in Park Heights.
I know. We heard about that too. Yeah, it's
horrible. Yeah. So at any rate, wherever we are, we always have to be on our best behavior, as if we were on a stage. Think of us as being a stage where everyone is watching us. Let's say I'm going to get a little bit gross now, if you'll forgive me. Let's say someone's on stage and they wipe their nose like that. Wouldn't that be absolutely disgusting? And say, I don't want to see that person. Who put them up there? What are they doing up there? So I'm sorry to give such a gross example, but even when it's something very minor, very very minor, it's of great concern, because when they see us, that's how religious people act. That's how religious people talk. That's how religious people, their honesty. All these things are on a stage. They're on a stage as who watches us. So we have to be very, very careful. Sometimes we make a mistake. If a person, God forbid, disgrace God's name, which is such, it's called Chilul Hashem. Chil means to profane, take the holiness out. If one, God forbid, committed a Chilul Hashem, it's such a serious offense that even when the only thing that really forgives it is when they eventually pass away. That's how powerful it is. With other things, Teshuvah, as you know, Teshuvah takes care of it. Sometimes a person, God forbid, has to suffer different problems, health problems, God forbid, or monetary problems, whatever, or emotional problems, whatever. But this is such a serious offense that it takes that much. So I have a passage over here that is speaking about this, that explains that if a person in some way disgrace God's name, then what they have to do is they have to go public and do the opposite by doing good deeds in public. in which, in order to make a Kiddush Hashem, to make a sanctification of God's name. Now, I just want to learn just for a moment, in a few more minutes.
Can I just share one more story? I know it's getting late.
As much as you can, as much as you want, as
So,
much as you can.
I was on a work trip in 2009, I think it was. I went to Reno, Nevada. It's a strange place for a firm person to go.
Yeah,
It turns out the shliach in Reno invited me to his house for dinner, and 2 nights in a row. And when I gave my talk, and my Rav, Rabbi Farron in Columbia, said, it's also completely to go down to the casino, and everything like that. Stay in your hotel room, go to the Rabbi Shliach's house, have a, learn time with him, whatever. But, so anyway, so I go to the weekend, I give my paper, and I meet the scientists from other organizations, and I fly home, and I get to the airport rather. I'm ready to fly back to Baltimore. And I go to buy T-shirts and refrigerator magnets, things that I normally do on a work trip to bring home for the family. And the lady working the cash register at this gift shop says, "Rabbi, what are you doing here in Reno? This place is gambling and all sorts of things. What are you doing here? And I just said to her, first, I'm not a rabbi, I'm an army scientist, and 2, I'm just buying some souvenirs for my family. I just gave her the straight answer. But the expectation is when you walk around and you have a kippah and you have tzitzits and you're wearing a white shirt and you have a beard, and the whole idea is that maybe, you're representing something in their eyes that you are obligated to behave as best you can, maybe,
It's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. So it makes us a little bit self-conscious sometimes, too. You probably find this funny. When I used to go shopping in the supermarket. When I lived in Randolph, Massachusetts, I had an Orthodox shul there. Most of the people weren't Orthodox, but it was an Orthodox shul. So it was a struggle to try to teach as much as we could and be a good example in the town as well as in the synagogue, etc. So,
right.
You'll find this funny. So I go to the supermarket and I see my congregants and other Jewish people as well. They're checking, what am I buying? What am I buying? Is it kosher? I'm just going to take another minute or two. This, amongst the many other subjects that are in this portion, is the mitzvah of cutting the omer, taking the omer off, because we're in the middle of the Sfiras HaOmer. So I just want to share with you the beautiful ceremony that was involved on the second night of Pesach when you and I are counting the Omer. So even if it was Shabbos, a group would go out in order to actually cut the barley that's going to be used for the next day's offering. So we had conservative and reform in those days too. People who did not want to obey the code of Jewish law, they didn't want to obey the Talmud, and what they used to do is they would say that because the Torah says Mimochos HaPesach, the Mimochos HaShabbos, the day after the rest day is when you cut the Omer. Pesach, Yom Tov, is also called Shabbos as well. So they would say you only start counting the Omer on Sunday. Only Sunday, that's only, not other day, which of course is wrong. So anyways, I'm just going to read to you a little passage which is from the Mishnah, in which you'll see what a great ceremony it was. On Erev Pesach, the Beis Din's delegates would visit the field in which the barley for the Omer would be harvested. So in order to make it quick and easy, they would tie up the different stalks that are going to be used to be cut. Then after the first day of Pesach, which is the night, it's when you and I are counting the Omer for the first time. The whole villagers, all the villagers of the area would gather together for the cutting. And they made a big bunch of noise and a commotion to show that this is a very huge and wonderful mitzvah to fulfill that you and I hopefully will be able to do in the future. So 3 Jews were appointed as harvesters. When it was night, the harvesters would go through and they would say, has the sun set? It has to be after the first day of Pesach. This is the night of the second day of Pesach. Did the sun set? Say, yes. Again, did the sun set a second time? Yes. Did the sun set? Yes. They would do this with a whole big commotion, etc. All the questions and answers were said 3 times. Then each would say, should I cut with this sickle? That's the tool, that you cut the stalks with. Should I cut with this sickle? Yes. Should I cut with this sickle? Yes. Should I cut with this sickle? Yes. Should I put the stalks into the basket? Yes. Should I put the stalks into the basket? Yes. Okay. If it was Shabbos, it would say, is today Shabbos? Right? Is today Shabbos? Yes. Is today Shabbos? Yes. Shall I harvest it now? Yes. So this is one of the commandments that actually supersedes Shabbos. And that you and I would feel very funny about. We don't go cutting grain on Shabbos. We don't do things like that in camping. But certain commandments are so powerful that the Almighty wants them to supersede the Shabbos. And that offering will be brought the next day. So I want to leave you with this thought and let you go. I want to leave you with this thought. God says this whole thing, all this cutting, you have to take the grain, thresh it, you got to toast it. All this is going to happen on Shabbos if the second day of Pesach is Shabbos. All this whole commotion is to produce a meal offering of about 5 pounds. They harvest 40 pounds. You have to thresh it. You have to sift it over and over and over and over again, so it'll be fine enough to make the offering. And then finally, it's mixed with oil, and it's going to be an offering on the Mizbeach. So this is what God says. I'll leave you with this thought. I ask you for one tiny bit of your barley, 5 pounds. And with this, I'm going to bless the whole world with the barley that it needs for the year, etc. Because on each holiday, we're judged for grain. On each holiday, we're judged for a specific item. Pesach, we're judged for grain. Shavuos, we're judged for fruit. And Sukkot, we're judged for water. So that's what God says. You give me this little tiny bit. So it shows us that God is precious to us. Each word of Torah, each prayer, each good deed that we do, each tiny thing that we do affects the whole world tremendously. So I'll leave you with that thought. And Yashikoa, as far as you know, you can shut the Zoom, and Mitzvah Shem will have a Gemara class tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. You have any other comments? You're more than welcome, or questions. You're more than welcome.
Right. No, thank you so much. No, it seems to me that the Mishnah seems to be how kind of like the instructions on how to do this mitzvah, and it has to be articulate. It has to be stipulated and stated aloud. That I know it's Shabbos, and I know I need to put it in the basket, and I know I need to cut it now, and I know it's with these things. It's kind of like a recipe, not a recipe, an instruction. The Mishnah gives the instructions on how the designees were able to carry it out.
It's a wonderful thing to do a mitzvah with a group, with enthusiasm. This makes the whole thing so much more meaningful to everyone, and so much more meaningful to the Almighty as well.
Thank you so much, Richard.
My pleasure. We'll talk tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem. Yeah.
Amen. Good. Baruch Hashem. Have a good night.
You too. Be well.
Okay. Thank you.
YouTube. Thank you for coming in, YouTubers. Hope you enjoyed the Parsha class tonight. We're going to continue with Haftorah tomorrow. My husband's class is at 5:30. Is it 5:45 or 5?
Tomorrow it's 5:30.
5:30. But it will not be on. That's Eastern Standard Time, New York, Baltimore. But we will not be broadcasting it on YouTube. It's only on the Zoom and the conference center. And the conference center is only open if there's people there, because if we can't leave it open if no one's there, because it plays music and disturbs the class. So in that case, you may want to call mine or my husband's phone and let us know you're interested in us opening it for you. In the meantime, tomorrow's class after my husband will be mine. And I come in an hour after my husband, which would be 6:30 New York or Baltimore time. And I'm going to go ahead and teach the Haftorah in the class tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed the class from tonight, and stay well and be blessed. And thanks for being part of what we're trying to do to reach out to this hurting world and turn it into a righteous place to live, which will be very pleasurable. Zayk Benj.